to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, we feature Joan Valle, the Chief of Regulatory for the Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. With 20 years of experience in environmental planning, Joan has extensive expertise in managing teams and programs related to key environmental regulations, including CEQA, NEPA, and the Clean Water Act. Joan is passionate about finding win-win solutions with resource agencies and other stakeholders. She also actively lobbies state and federal decision makers to advocate for policies that benefit Riverside County and other communities. Joan is a dedicated member of the AEP Legislative Committee, where she discusses proposed environmental laws and policies. And additionally, she serves on the National Association of Flood and Stormwater Management Agencies Flood Management Committee, where she collaborates with other agencies and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters on federal laws and policies. Joan joins us today to discuss her leadership journey in the environmental industry. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Jessa. My pronouns are she, her.
I'm Corinne. My pronouns are she, her.
And today we're joined by Joan Valle, who's Chief of Regulatory with the Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Thank you so much for joining us, Joan.
Thank you, Jessa. Thank you both. Good afternoon. I'm honored and grateful to be here with you today.
Joan, first things first, how are you connected to AEP?
Well, I have been involved in AEP for nearly 20 years, almost from day one as an environmental analyst, thanks to Kent Norton. I think you both know Kent. He was my very first boss in the environmental industry, and he was on the AEP. He was the AEP state president at that time, and because I'm no dummy, he was involved, so I got involved. And I've pretty much been involved in one way or another ever since. And really, AEP has been integral in my professional development. I started out helping the Inland Empire chapter, just assisting with their monthly programs. And that quickly earned me a position on the board as programs director. And at that time, we were having in-person meetings nearly once a month. So as you can imagine, I was pretty busy with AEP stuff. I can remember barely getting back to the office, putting the box of materials from one program under my desk, and then I had to kick off the planning for the next program. So it was pretty intense. In hindsight, my utilization or my billable hours must have been terrible, but I wasn't too worried about that at that time. That was Ken's deal. But being programs director, it was such a great experience. It put me out there in front of the hot topics, in front of the general membership. I made a lot of professional contacts with folks that were well above my pay grade. They were established and prominent professionals in the industry, and they were my speakers. So I made a lot of contacts in the industry early on in my career, thanks to AEP. And of course, it was great for my professional development. And then AEP has been with me every step of the way, really. So I served on the board in various capacities for about 8 years. So after my first stint as programs director, I briefly served as treasurer and then was elected to chapter president. And after stepping down from the board in 2012, I stayed engaged with AEP as a legislative liaison. And although I've drifted in and out over the years, I continue to sit in with my peers on that committee. And that's been fantastic. We track various CEQA legislation and related laws, and we're often approached by OPR and various state agencies and decision makers to solicit our opinion on legislative proposals and other hot topics, like CEQA reform. So participating on the Leg Committee helps me stay current on CEQA, which is great because my current responsibilities have grown into other areas. So it would probably otherwise be tough for me to keep up with CEQA.
That's great. That's quite a history. Thanks for your service with AEP.
Of course.
And I just love the description of the programs box because I also was a programs director for a while, and just that box and having to like haul it between my car, my office, the event venue, and then I don't know about you guys, but we had this like pop-up projection screen that was huge, and it was always making sure I had the car that could fit the projection screen on days that we had programs. So that brought back a lot of fond memories hearing you talk about that.
You're bringing back flashbacks.
Up to the program directors out there doing the real work.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is now they have, after I left the board, at some point they got 2 programs directors because it was such a demanding position. I mean, I'm sure it still is.
Good to know there's some help though too. So thank you guys both for your work too. And continued work. And speaking of, so Joan, you are Chief of Regulatory with Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Can you please describe your role there?
Yeah, of course. Well, my primary responsibility is to ensure that the district complies with applicable regulatory and environmental laws, such as CEQA, Fish and Game Code, Sections 404 and 401 of the Clean Water Act, the state and federal Endangered Species Acts, and then various local laws and requirements. Because of CEQA, my division sees nearly every discretionary action that flood takes. And my team conducts and manages the environmental review for pretty much everything we do. Our CIPs, our maintenance, our repair projects, emergency projects. We have federal projects that we partner with the Corps of Engineers. And we have a development review process that warrants a small team of devoted professionals for the environmental compliance related to the flood control component of developer projects. But in general, our bread and butter here in regulatory is CEQA and getting the permits needed to construct and maintain our facilities. We have a solid in-house team of CEQA experts in my division, but we tend to use a lot of consultants too because we have a long list of projects. So my division is a mix of professionals and technical experts, including traditional environmental planners, aka CEQA practitioners. We have biologists, botanists, regulatory experts, and we have one planner that's actually a geologist by training. So that's kind of cool.
That's great. And what do you enjoy the most about working for the Flood Control District?
Almost everything. I was going to say everything, but I'm like, okay, almost everything. No, the county is just a fantastic employer. They provide competitive pay, good benefits, lots of paid holidays. And I really love and appreciate our flood family. We have good people here, about 250 dedicated public servants doing great things for our communities. And I enjoy the collaboration, the creativity, the educational and professional development support that Flood provides. Our former general manager used to say, hire good people and get out of the way. And I've always held on to that. And I think it's proved to be a successful business model. Flood control has a great reputation in the industry for being a leader. And the leadership here at Flood is amazing, really at every level of our organization, but it comes from the top down. We're very progressive and always happy to try new ideas and processes. Better, stronger, faster. It's all good. But one thing that's really cool about working here, or I'd say doing CEQA from the lead agency perspective, is that I'm not just doing CEQA and then never hearing about the project again. Instead, I get to work on or follow a project all the way from idea through design and construction, managing the mitigation, managing the HMMP, and then we follow the maintenance work in perpetuity. So it's the full project life cycle, which is something I didn't see when I was a consultant.
And then, being the chief of regulatory, what makes you proud about working for flood control?
Oh, lots. A lot of people will say something like, "What on earth do you do at flood control? You must be bored." I'm like, "Oh, I wish I could have just one boring day." But, we hardly get any rain. So they have a point. But when it does rain, we need to be prepared. So we have 250 employees that work year round, making sure that when it does rain, the water goes where we want it to, and that it doesn't harm life and property. Riverside County is the fastest growing county in the state, and we have 2.5 million residents. So it's a big charge to provide flood control. But to do this, we're a machine. We design, we build, and we maintain. So we also work closely with our cities, the public, stakeholders like FEMA and the Corps of Engineers, EPA. And here in regulatory, we also work closely with the resource agencies to ensure that we don't impact the species, habitat, and our waterways. But ultimately, I think the reason nobody thinks about flood control is because we do our job well. I say we're silent warriors, and it's very rewarding to do the work we do to protect our communities.
And I'm sure also with the last couple years of, pretty remarkable storm events that we've had, probably kept you on your toes with, things like 100-year storm events occurring, back-to-back years.
Oh, yeah. All the fires that we've had causes problems, of course, when the rainy season comes in. And yeah, we actually had 200-year event out in the desert. So it's been challenging.
Yeah, sounds like it. And you said that you like everything about working for the flood control district, which is great. I mean, almost. But what a joy to love your job that much and the work you do. And so if you had to pick though, what are your favorite types of projects to work on?
All projects typically follow the same process, right? But each project has unique constraints and challenges. And my favorite projects are the complex ones with the unique challenges. Whether it's an environmental constraint, like an endangered species or tribal cultural resources being present, or a right-of-way issue, conflicting interest among stakeholders. In all circumstances, I really enjoy the stakeholder engagement, the problem solving, and sitting at the table with multiple parties and coming up with a solution that works for everyone. It's just really cool and satisfying when you know that you are contributing to the solution, and ultimately that does good things for our communities.
And I think what you said earlier too, like getting to see the project from inception, the completion and maintenance and monitoring is has to be so rewarding to be able to see that whole process and to be along the life cycle of that, where some other people are just touching certain parts of it as it goes along. But that seems, very rewarding, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's kind of funny too, because, when I was a consultant preparing CEQA documents, I'd put in all kind of mitigation measures that I thought would be helpful. And then sometimes out of an abundance of caution, let's throw this one in there. And that was probably a little eye-opening for me when I first got to flood and had to implement the mitigation measures. And it definitely changed my perspective on the details of the measures, and things like that. Just making sure they're actually implementable, when you got boots on the ground.
Yeah. And coming back a little bit too, so something you said earlier. So you talked about, again, loving to work for the flood control district, and that there's, it's competitive pay. And so and other things, of course, but how does the flood control district take care of its people?
Flood really is a fantastic organization. Like I said before, from the top down, management is very supportive of staff development, continuous growth. We address the district. We say, hi, flood family, like in big emails and stuff. And they really are progressive. When I first started at Flood 12 years ago, there was only one planner position and there were no promotional opportunities. And so at that time, I never could have become a division chief. However, because of the progressive nature, we now have several upward opportunities for planners, including the one that I hold. So this is a perfect example of the progressive management team.
Anything sorry, Corinne, just to touch on that, I follow you guys on LinkedIn, and I feel like there's always there's always job ads and career opportunities within the environmental field, and there's been some fun recruiting videos that show, I feel like, I can't remember what it's called, but like a day in the life with flood control districts. So I'm just going to give you guys a good plug. Hopefully to go out and follow your LinkedIn page, or for anyone out there looking, that you guys are pretty active and definitely provide a lot of insight on your LinkedIn page too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for that, Jessa. We started creating some promotional type videos to highlight, what it's like to work here. I have at least one of some of our planning staff out in the field and in the office talking about what they do and what they love. And then there's one of me that made me squirm a bit. So I've only seen it once, but it was all for the same purpose, right? Describing, what we're looking for and what the work we do in the hopes of finding people that, would come here and be happy to be here. So.
Well, in addition to your LinkedIn video debut, what other professional accomplishments are you proud of?
One of the things I really love about my work is I get to lobby. I get to do some lobbying for better policy and laws that directly affect our business, right? Our mission. And the district is very supportive of this. I believe I belong to a few professional organizations that review and influence state and federal policy, with AEP being one of them. And I'm currently actually assembling a working group to take on a few more areas of reform that I think are needed. But I love to meet with various state and federal decision makers and help them, or I like to help influence policy and policy changes that'll make things better, right, for our world as we know it, and also make things better for agencies like ours that have to implement the laws and policies. But I find this lobbying work extremely rewarding because my contributions go beyond Riverside County, right? And they end up helping other agencies either statewide or nationwide, and of course that's fantastic. And then there's another probably more measurable contribution that I'm proud of, and that is, so I led the effort here for the county that landed Riverside County in the top 1% of the FEMA CRS program, the communities nationwide, and that was a really cool surprise because I didn't realize that was even an option, or we were in the running for that. But it was a strategic effort. And it gives the county residents and businesses a 20% discount on their flood insurance premiums. So that's definitely a feel-good accomplishment.
Absolutely. And then, one thing we chatted a little bit about in preparing this is just, what an accomplishment it is to be a woman in this industry and be that division chief in a municipality as big as Riverside. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about what did your career path look like getting to, such an amazing leadership position?
Well, I started out in the consulting world as an entry-level analyst. I entered the industry at a great time in the early 2000s when development was going crazy out here in Southern California. And there was a huge need for CEQA practitioners and project managers, and really experts in the entire development industry were in high demand. My first job was at Michael Bram & Associates. And I was very fortunate to move up quickly when I was there. And I promoted to senior project manager. And part of the, I guess, the speed of how I promoted was due to the demand. And of course, some of it was due to my eager beaver nature.
I'm
However,
sure more than some of it, Joan.
Thank you. I left MBA and I went to Jones and Stokes, which is now ICF. And from there, I went to URS, which is now AECOM. And when I was a consultant, I worked on every type of project imaginable. Everything from housing and commercial, industrial, railroads, schools, infrastructure, Caltrans projects. I worked on Riverside County projects, wealthy jurisdictions, broke jurisdictions. I even worked on one project that crossed the international border, and it required President Obama at the time needed to sign off on it. So a lot of diversity in my work history. And I find that was very beneficial for my ultimately for my career growth. However, now my focus is on flood control projects, which I think is really cool because I took my CEQA experience and expertise and brought that to the table and then learned a bunch of other pieces. But focusing just on flood control projects, it's a niche all on its own. But and in hindsight, I feel like my entire career set me up for the position I have now. Even prior to entering the environmental field, there was a time for several years actually where I had a part-time job as a courier, and my territory was Riverside County. So, or parts of it, everything from like Moreno Valley, Paris, down through Elsinore, Canyon Lake, into Temecula. So I learned a good chunk, just of the geography, the spatial layout and all of that. So I think it's cool the way everything feels like it led me up to my current position.
So do you still have your Thomas Brothers map booklets from that job?
I just got rid of a couple of those, but I did keep a few for, the apocalypse or something like that.
And what is your dream for the environmental profession? Having seen the type of ways it's evolved and changed and even being able to have that big picture, approach to legislation and policy, what changes would you like to make as a leader?
I'd like to see more lobbying for better laws and policy, more coordination between the decision makers, the agencies. We see a lot of conflict in agencies at really the state and the federal level with conflict or conflicting laws and mandates and things like that. And so it makes it challenging for folks like us here trying to implement and trying to do things, with a good heart and, really protecting the environment. But if you have one law that says you have to do this and it conflicts with another law, it makes it really tough. So that's probably something I'd really like to work on. And I might even work on, maybe it's like my retirement gig or something like that. But at any rate, it does seem like also in some ways we've gotten away from the intent of the environmental laws. And so just all those kind of things that don't seem to be very congruent with actually getting stuff done as well as protecting the environment.
I love that. Yeah, as someone who's, on the industry side of things, especially the renewable industry, I couldn't endorse more the request for, consistency and logic and just clear guidance for what we are supposed to do when we're, taking on projects that we think, ultimately have a net benefit to the environment and wanting that clear path to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that seems to pop up are the indirect consequences. They're not always well thought out. Most of the laws, right, they come to us with good intentions. But implementing them, as you know, is maybe another thing.
That's what I feel like with you all as planners. I mean, Corinne as well, is you see the big picture and how everything's connected and how everything intersects. And so when there is a law or there's some type of compliance that is not in alignment with the big picture, you can see where the pieces are going to fall apart. And so I'm sure it's really frustrating when you have a plan, you're like, I know how to get there from like A to Z, but then things start to go in a different order that won't let you get there. I can imagine it can be a little frustrating at times. And, but like you said, Joan, I think having that broad experience too just allows you to even have more of that bird's eye view of how like everything can fit together and how to go from like design, implementation to monitoring and maintenance on these projects. I could see that being so valuable. Like you said, your career, all your experience has led you to this point in your career. And I could see how it all fits, like listening to your story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah. And
I might be a little biased, but I'm having fun.
No, I love it. I mean, you can hear the passion and enthusiasm you have. And like you said earlier, where people like, oh, it must be so boring. It's like, no, I'm doing such a good job. It seems boring to you. That's the point. It's you are supposed to think it's boring because you're not impacted.
Exactly.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I know, in this position, Chief of Regulatory, you're a very busy individual and you have a lot going on. And I just want to thank you for your time to join the podcast, to prep for the podcast, to speak with Corinne and I on this. And going to just get into our rapid five and let you go on managing the regulatory for the flood control and water conservation district.
Okay.
All right, Joan, what is your favorite daily habit?
Definitely my morning coffee. Enjoy sitting down with my coffee in the morning. If it's a weekend, it's a little more casual, but on a work day, I use that time to kind of get grounded for my day, think about what's on my plate and what I need to achieve.
Love that. How do you take your coffee?
It depends.
Okay.
How I like to take it is with some half and half. But too much half and half is not good for the hips.
Yeah.
So I toggle back and forth.
All about balance.
With half and half.
I love that. Okay. What are 3 things you would bring to a deserted island?
So a boat, a fisherman, and probably a life straw or a case of life straws.
I would like to be stranded with you. We would not be stranded for long. What is your favorite environmental policy?
It has to be CEQA, right? I mean, I appreciate the ability as a lead agency to implement the law, yet we get some discretion, right? But as we all know, there's a substantial amount of public oversight out there. And of course, the lawsuit process challenges. So it keeps us honest. But I definitely just love the CEQA.
And what is your favorite flora or fauna?
I'd say the California poppy, or really any old oak tree, any type of oak.
All right. And finish this sentence. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if cookies and ice cream were in the vegetable food group?
Hear, hear. Well, thank you again, Joan. We really enjoyed speaking with you and learning more about your perspective and your background and your professional experience. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, of course. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.